Gaming Bolt presents real meanings behind these 15 confused video game endings. What is an ending? Is it the culmination of events that drove you along? Is it your reward for partaking on a journey, or is it the destination? However you may look at it, some destinations are weirder than most, and plenty of games have left us confused by their endings. Haven't you ever wondered what it really all means, though? Developers may not have confirmed some of these, and many are left ambiguous on purpose, relying on one's own interpretation. Regardless, here are what some of the actual meanings of 15 confusing video games could be. And yes, spoilers abound, like everywhere, even if they make no sense. Bloodborne. The stories in From Software's games aren't generally known for being easy to decipher. In Bloodborne, however, the ending isn't too complicated. You start the game receiving a blood transfusion to halt the plague inside of you, which is your main reason for coming to Yharnam, before signing a contract and becoming a hunter in the process. By the end, you can choose to be free from your contract, awakening in a world where the sun is rising. Many debate which of the realities is actually true, and it could be a case of Gehrman, the hunter advisor, killing you to prevent a new Great One from emerging, which we'll get into in a bit. If you refuse to fight Gehrman, you become the next hunter advisor when the moon presence, one of the often hinted at Great Ones, descends from the sky and disables you. Throughout the game, you discover an item called 1/3 of umbilical cord. Though there are 4, you only need to collect 3 and consume them before fighting Gehrman. Once the moon presence arrives, it can't take hold of you, and thus begins the final battle. When you win, the plain doll can be seen picking up a slug, and judging from the description on the trophy obtained, you've essentially become the moon presence, in infant form, of course. The third ending is regarded as the most true, with your character essentially heralding a new age without the plague. If Dark Souls is any indication, though, it shouldn't take long before the cycle begins anew. Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy VIII's ending has been the subject of debate for quite a long time, most of it beginning with Squall being stabbed by Edea/Ultimecia. When Squall awakens next, he's surprised that his wound is gone. From there, the game spirals into a mess of time-traveling, aliens, possession, sorceresses from the future, and whatnot. Apparently, the 6 party members actually grew up together in an orphanage, and using the Guardian forces has effectively caused memory loss. Edea is the one who ran the orphanage during the whole Sorceress War and started Garden and Seed with Cid to combat the sorceresses. Unfortunately, she became possessed by Ultimecia, a sorceress from the future who's trying to compress time. That's all well and good, but how does that explain the ending, which features, among other creepy things, a faceless Squall? It's proposed that Squall is actually passing through different time periods, eventually encountering Edea in the past and imparting the knowledge of Seed and Garden to her. Ultimecia, who's dying after the final battle, also shows up to give Edea her powers because time paradoxes and whatnot. Still, how does everything just tie up so neatly, and why did the game suddenly take so many liberties with its plot? For instance, why did Irvine just suddenly remember that the party grew up in an orphanage together? We're not debating that he remembers at all, going by the Guardian Force's memory loss logic, but the timing is kind of odd. So, a popular theory that's been thrown around is that Squall is actually dying from the stab wound that Edea gave him. Everything that happens from then on is his dream while dying. While Square Enix has never confirmed the same, the death dream theory is currently the best possible explanation. It explains why everything suddenly becomes more fantastical from that point on. Squall is essentially dreaming up something while he's dying. The faceless Squall at the end is just him not knowing what is real or fake anymore, himself included, and reuniting with Rinoa under the moonlight is the happy ending he felt he deserved. Braid. Braid's most basic plot twist is that Tim, the hero, is actually the monster. He's not the one saving the princess, and the final level, which shows Tim running towards the princess, is actually happening in reverse. It's the princess that's trying to get away from Tim, but what did Tim do to make him so horrible? One theory is that Tim is actually a scientist who created the atom bomb, and is trying to atone for his mistakes. The bomb in this case is, you guessed it, represented by the princess. Perhaps Tim is trying to get to the bomb to try and retrieve it. Maybe it's all one big purgatory and he's chasing the only thing that he knows in this big expanse of nothingness. Creator Jonathan Blow said that there are multiple ways to interpret the story, but in the end, it's about the journey and not the destination, which is basically a nice way of saying, now theorize this for an eternity. Oh well, at least the witness made more sense, right? Shadow of the Colossus. Wander is in a bind in the beginning of Shadow of the Colossus. His love, Mono, has fallen and he's trying to save her. Unfortunately, he encounters Dorman in the Forbidden Land, who tells him that a revival is possible if Wander can slay the 16 Colossi. In trying to save Mono, Wander is essentially releasing the darkness of Dorman entombed in all of the Colossi. This makes him a perfect host for the revived Dorman by the end. Basically, Wander is doing the bad guy's dirty work, all while being pursued by the priest Emom and his soldiers. By the end, when Wander has been fully corrupted by the darkness, Dorman possesses his body and is then resurrected. It takes the priest Emom to cast a spell and spread Dorman's light throughout the Forbidden Land in order to defeat Wander. As a result, Wander becomes a baby with horns, as do future children, which is where Eco starts off. The light garnered was enough to resurrect Mono, thus leading her to become Wander's mother. Cruel fate. The crazy part, this is actually all a prequel to Eco. Wander is reborn as a baby with horns, which explains the horned people in Eco, essentially. The Matrix Path of Neo. The Matrix series upset more than its share of fans with the ending to Revelations. We wouldn't put it past the Wachowski siblings to try and retcon that with The Matrix Path of Neo. But what in the holy hell is that ending about? The Wachowskis show up before the penultimate boss fight, explain the changed circumstances, invite you to fight a huge Agent Smith boss, and then sarcastically tell you to enjoy enlightenment. They also admit that having the same ending as The Matrix Revelations would have been super lame. And we see Zion celebrating the end of the war with We Are the Champions playing in the background after you fell the giant Agent Smith. There are confusing endings, and then there are just, what the F? Again, there are many theories behind why this ending was the way it was. Here are two possibilities. A, the Wachowskis are giving hardcore fans their happy ending and mocking them in turn. You didn't like the ending to Revelations and couldn't understand how deep it was? Okay, well we'll give you this happy sappy ending that's totally stupid and cliche. Enjoy that. Or B, they hated how bad Path of Neo turned out and decided to mess around with it. But, just enough that it didn't seem like they were totally trashing it, though plenty of harm was still done. Honestly, we wouldn't be surprised by either. Inside. Playdead's Inside is the journey of a young, nameless boy as he stumbles upon people being controlled. The boy subsequently has some powers to control them as well, but eventually finds himself freeing some giant blob. However, Inside is actually about the same experimental blob manipulating you, the player, who then controls the boy to obtain freedom. The boy possesses some incredible powers that can set the blob free, and as such, everything, including the ambiguous instructions the player receives, is all according to the blob's plan. It's possible to not follow the blob's instructions though. Collect the hidden orbs in the game and you'll find a vault that allows you to shut down the boy, thus ending the control of him and keeping the blob sealed forever. Inside is essentially a commentary on thought control, especially as it pertains to video games. How much control do we actually have? Is the happiest ending achieved by not fulfilling the game's objective? Was the boy much like the others but somehow more gifted and thus an excellent tool for manipulation? And how much of that gift was because you, the player, was controlling him? Inside won't tell you the answers anytime soon, but of all the theories, the blob that controls everything is the most reasonable. Super Fire Pro Wrestling Special. Ever wonder how Suda51 of Let It Die, No More Heroes, and Killer 7 first became famous? It was with the ending to Super Fire Pro Wrestling Special. The hero loses again and again. His coach and close friend separately die. His girlfriend leaves him, and the defending world champion, originally called Ric Flair, kills his tag partner. The hero defeats the champion, thus standing alone in the ring among cheering fans. Several days later, he shoots himself. While this may all seem out of left field, it's almost a commentary on the new age of kayfabe, where the lines between real and scripted are endless blended. While the coach and close friend dying are definitely real, they become part of the wrestler's story. The world champion being the ultimate villain and killing your partner for some heat, all for storyline purposes. By the end, the hero was probably just fed up on not knowing what was real. A modified take on this is that for all of the scripted accolades garnered through wrestling, the consequences of reality as represented by his friends dying and his girlfriend leaving were far too strong for our hero to ignore. It's the perfect mix of kayfabe and reality, not all that different from The Wrestler starring Mickey Rourke, though Randy the Ram Robinson's journey was more about accepting his fate rather than escaping from it. Monkey Island 2. In the final battle with Guybrush Threepwood and LeChuck, you inflict some massive damage on your pirate nemesis with the help of a voodoo doll. However, LeChuck asks for his mask to be taken off, which reveals Guybrush's creepy brother Chucky. Suddenly, a delivery crew man shows up and says that the two brothers aren't allowed there, in the tunnels of an amusement park. We then see two children emerging from the tunnels and meeting their parents. Guybrush can either state his identity or inquire as to what's going on when the parents ask. You do see Chucky looking at the screen with crazy voodoo eyes, which is usually your cue that everything's gone for a toss. Eventually, in the credits, Elaine, Guybrush's woman, will wonder aloud about whether LeChuck cast a spell on the hero. What exactly happened during the climactic battle? There are several theories, especially since director Ron Gilbert would work in secret and not explain things. Here's the thing though, it's all a hallucination. That's the official canon as per Monkey Island 3, and even if you want to theorize about parallel universes, it was officially all a bad dream. The other theories are that Guybrush hit his head at some point, thus leading to all of this insanity, or that LeChuck cast a spell on him, thus the whole hallucination explanation. Who knows what Ron Gilbert was actually thinking. No More Heroes. In No More Heroes, Travis Touchdown is fighting to become number one, killing all of the other members of the United Association of Assassins that gets in his way. This is done at the behest of a woman named Sylvia Crystal. At some point, it's revealed that the UAA is a sham that Sylvia set up so that Travis could kill Jean, his half-sister who killed his parents because of abuse faced by their father. However, Travis's twin brother shows up by the end and reveals that Sylvia is his wife and has been conning people. The funny thing is the meta commentary behind it all. At some point, Travis realizes he was fighting simply for the sake of it. Being number one means nothing. He's really just searching for the end, the exit to paradise as they call it. When battling Henry, Travis realizes that there's really only one exit, death, and only his brother can lead him there. So how does that explain the fact that Sylvia and little Jean are admiring a painting of Travis and his brother in a museum at the end of No More Heroes? It's possible that this is the real world, and Travis and Henry being nothing more than a neat little battle that we see in everyday manga and anime. As for No More Heroes 2, well, that's a story for another day. Final Fantasy X. In Final Fantasy X, a war is taking place between Zanarkand, led by Yu Yevon, and Bavel. Zanarkand found some pretty creative ways to fight this war. They sacrificed humans who would become Faith that subsequently dreamed up weapons for the summoners of Zanarkand to use. Those are Aeons. This isn't to say that Titus is an Aeon. It gets a whole lot more complicated than that. See, Yu Yevon had an even better plan to win against Bavel. Have Zanarkand exist as a dream by the collective Faith and then have it summoned somewhere else as a separate city in Spira. This would ensure their continued existence, and Sin was created to act as a protector for the Dream City. However, since it's composed of the spirit of Jecht, Titus's father, it actually attacks the city to push Titus to end the whole farce, or cycle, whatever you want to go with. So in the end, when Titus disappears, it's because the Faith have finally stopped dreaming and the denizens of the Dream City fade away. Of course, he reappears in Final Fantasy X too, but that's another mess altogether. For the time being, take solace in the fact that Titus may have been some elaborate dream, but he does eventually have his own existence, thus leading to his reunion with Yuna. And then they live happily ever after, doing awkward laughs into the distance. The Stanley Parable. You're Stanley, a boring office worker who suddenly hears the voice of the narrator and decides to follow his commands. The big office you're working for is discovered to be nothing more than an elaborate machination to enslave your coworkers, and you subsequently find freedom. That's if you listen to the narrator, though. The Stanley Parable actually is a lot like the movie Stranger Than Fiction. It's about a character and his relationship with the narrator. Depending on how you interact with the narrator, doing or not doing what he tells you, different things happen and various endings emerge. Each subsequent ending has different meanings. In one, Stanley doesn't like the world created by the narrator and kills himself. In another, Stanley follows the narrator's instructions and obtains freedom. And so it goes until you discover all of them. Heaven for Stanley, for instance, is just one big room full of buttons, because that's what he was so good at. Stranger Than Fiction had several interesting messages to it. How one shouldn't let their life idle away since they don't know when it will end. The importance of fighting against fate and doing the right thing versus fate, and so on, which are also mirrored in the Stanley parable. Of course, it gets a bit more complicated at some points, like how the narrator doesn't understand his own paradoxes and is taking Stanley's help to solve them, or how the narrator is taking revenge on Stanley for not following the well-written plot, but you get what we mean. It's funny how the best possible explanation for the Stanley parable is essentially the Stanley parable. You derive your own moral from it depending on the kind of moral you want. Alan Wake. Oh, Alan Wake. This ending had us confounded for the longest time and still doesn't quite make 100% sense. Basically, Alan saves his wife Alice from a dark presence in the Bright Falls Lake. Wake is submerged in the lake and his wife emerges just fine. Many believe that Mr. Scratch played a role in all of this, but the DLC might hold a few more clues as to the whole "it's not a lake, it's an ocean" thing. Contrary to what you might think, this doesn't mean the lake is a whole brand new world that Wake has entered. Instead, as the DLC showcases, he's actually dealing with a fragmented mind and trying to return to reality. Then again, the DLC could also be a dream, as Wake could still be trying to write his own escape. That would explain the numerous teases of Alan Wake's return and whatnot that we've seen from Remedy in Quantum Break. Either way, he's not coming back anytime soon. Sorry, Wake fans, but that ship has sailed into the proverbial ocean, which is not a lake, by the way. It just means he's not coming back. Limbo. Playdead's breakout platformer Limbo was critically acclaimed for its storytelling and art style, but that very narrative contains nothing but sadness. The main character is dead, trapped in an eternal limbo chasing after his sister, who's also dead. Clues provided in the title screen indicate that the two died from falling out of a treehouse. There are many ways to spin the overall tale, though. For instance, the sister doesn't know she's dead and is just running away. Perhaps the boy is the real villain, a la Tim from Braid. In a way, the transition from forest landscape to a harsher cityscape may also represent the boy moving to a place that he didn't like in real life. Or maybe it's a flashback to a harsher time, and he moved to the countryside with his family, which eventually led to the accident that killed him and his sister. However, as a whole, there's evidence to support that the sister you're chasing after is not real, and that the boy is simply traversing limbo for eternity, running away from his worst fears and phobias manifesting in physical form. That's the giant spider that's chasing him, by the way. Killzone 3. If Killzone 2 is famed for elevating the series' popularity, then Killzone 3 is most famous for its ending pretty much angering everyone. You know, the one ending where Sev and his friends nuke the whole freaking planet, killing everyone? No, it wasn't just a prank. However, in a post-credits scene, we see two Helghast soldiers greeting someone who managed to survive thanks to an escape pod. They even address him as Sir. Surely that's leading up to something, right? Who knows? Maybe that one explosion signifies how war benefits no one and it's just a means to everyone's mutual destruction. Nope, that's pretty much it. Killzone Shadowfall lead designer Eric Boltz explained it best. The survivor was never meant to be revealed and the whole ending was just an attempt to reboot the universe and do something different. So basically it was a cop-out ending so that the team could have a fresh start of sorts for Shadowfall. Sorry Killzone 3 fans, but it is what it is. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. There's a lot going on in Metal Gear Solid 2, so we'll try to get through it all. Raiden is involved in one grand experiment, the Selection for Society's Sanity, or S3 plan essentially shaped Raiden into who he was, from his VR training of the first game to the events of Metal Gear Solid 2, which were meant to mirror the first game. But why? The main goal of the Patriots who created this plan is to control free speech and stimulate our culture to evolve by reducing the stress on the individual. It's a kind of martial law concept that is theoretically meant to evolve society's culture as a whole. Raiden is the experiment here, and he's essentially the most extreme case. If the Patriots and GW, the name given to Arsenal Gear's AI, which is controlling the nanomachines inside of Raiden, could successfully control this new Solid Snake, then how difficult would it be to control society? I mean, that weird simulation of Colonel and Rose seen later in the game? Well, that's GW messing with Raiden's brain, and it worked pretty well up to a point. In a spooky way, Metal Gear Solid 2 is sort of heralding the future. You control the memes, and society soon follows. Solidus Snake, the ex-president and leader of the Sons of Liberty, has an interesting role. He's essentially battling against the Patriots and is even likened to George Washington at several points. By the end of the game, his symbolism is a lot deeper. He's sort of like Big Boss in a metaphorical sense. Revolver Ocelot is an even odder character. He's essentially playing both sides in an effort to locate the Patriots. And then there's Solid Snake, who's first charged with leading the terrorists and then is ultimately battling against them, trying to find Arsenal gear and ultimately the location of the Patriots. By the end, the entire game is an experiment by the Patriots, a group of AI, to control you with Raiden as the main conduit. Raiden eventually establishes his own identity by the end of the game. He overcomes Solidus Snake, who resembles Big Boss in the end, thus proving himself superior. Though Solid Snake eventually looks like Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid 4 as well, so it's a never-ending cycle. There's even a bit of a father and son vibe going on, with Solidus and Raiden having been selected because their relationship mirrors that of Big Boss and Snake. But anyway, in the end, Raiden throws away the dog tags with the player's name on it, and he says he'll be picking his own name and life. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.